The night was cold, and the highway stretched like an empty ribbon across the black horizon. My name is Nathan Cole. I am a paramedic who has seen things that could drain the color from any soul, but nothing prepared me for that night. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, my partner and I were driving home from a family event, tired but content. The road was silent, save for the hum of tires and the occasional chirp of insects. Then, just ahead in the beams of our headlights, we saw her. A young girl stood motionless on the shoulder, barefoot, with her arms at her sides and hair matted over her face. She did not wave, did not cry, just stared. Something about her presence gnawed at every rational instinct. We drove past without speaking, without stopping. That decision saved our lives. If you ever see her too, I beg you, do not stop. Keep driving. My wife Elena and I had spent the afternoon at her sister's place in Riverdale. We left a little after 9 o'clock in the evening, once the kids were asleep and the laughter had faded into yawns. We did not have far to drive, just 2 hours back to our apartment near Graymore. The road between the two towns was mostly highway, with long, empty stretches and very few signs of life. The first hour passed uneventfully. We listened to music, occasionally talked, and enjoyed the rare quiet time away from the city noise. Elena had begun drifting off in the passenger seat, her head against the window, while I kept my eyes focused on the darkness ahead. Somewhere around 10:30, the scenery changed. We had exited the interstate and taken a detour suggested by Elena's GPS. The new route cut through a forested area, where the trees grew thick and pressed close to the edges of the road. I remember thinking it felt like driving through a tunnel made of bark and branches. The deeper we went, the more our headlights became the only proof the world existed beyond our windshield. About 20 minutes later, my fuel light blinked on. I cursed under my breath. Elena stirred and asked what happened. I told her not to worry and that I would stop at the next gas station we found. She rubbed her eyes and sat up straighter, the warmth of sleep quickly replaced by a mild concern. We drove in silence for several more miles. There were no road signs, no other cars, no buildings. Even the stars seemed to have vanished above the canopy of trees. I glanced at the fuel gauge again. Still dropping. That was when we saw her. The girl appeared as if summoned by the shadows themselves, standing alone on the right side of the road. She looked about 12 or 13 years old. Her dress was white but tattered at the bottom. Her feet were bare, and she stood completely still, arms hanging limply at her sides. Her long, dark hair fell over her face, but I could still see her eyes. They did not blink. Elena gasped and reached for the door handle. "Wait," I said sharply, pressing harder on the gas pedal. "She's just a child," Elena whispered. "We have to help her." "No," I said. My voice came out louder than intended. "We are not stopping." She stared at me, stunned. I did not look back. I kept my eyes on the road. Something about that girl was profoundly wrong. I could not explain it. My mind screamed that it was a trick, a trap, a mistake waiting to be made. Whatever she was, she did not belong out there. Not alone. Not unmoving. Not without reason. We drove past her. Elena turned in her seat to look back, her face pale and confused. "She is gone," she said quietly. "Nathan, she is gone." "I know," I said. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was as if the forest had inhaled and was waiting to exhale. Elena stopped speaking. I turned off the radio. The only sound was the wind and the sound of our tires on the road. Then we saw her again. About 10 minutes later, further down the road, she was there again. Same place. Same posture. Same unblinking stare. Elena gasped again. "What is happening?" My skin prickled with cold sweat. "It cannot be the same girl," I said, though I did not believe it. "She is identical," Elena whispered. "Everything. Even her hair." I slowed the car slightly but did not stop. As we passed her again, she turned her head just slightly. Her face stayed covered, but the motion made my heart thump like a drum. That was the moment I realized we were not seeing a lost child. We were seeing something else. "I am turning around," I said. "We are going back to the highway." "No," Elena said quickly. "No. What if she is behind us again?" I looked in the rearview mirror. Empty road. But the dread was deep now, like something clinging to my spine. I turned the wheel and took a side road, hoping it would lead us back toward something familiar. The GPS had lost its signal. The phone screen had frozen on a blank white background. Elena tapped her phone, frowning. Mine is not working either. The road narrowed and twisted through the woods like a snake. I kept driving, checking the mirrors every few seconds. That was when we passed a gas station. It looked like something out of time. An old, rusted sign, a flickering overhead light, and two ancient pumps. There was a single truck parked near the building, its windows dark. Should we stop? Elena asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. We have no choice, I said. We are almost out of fuel. I pulled in slowly. The ground beneath us was cracked pavement. The light above the pumps flickered like it was unsure whether to live or die. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the station's small store. The air was still. Not quiet, still. Not a single sound in the trees, no breeze, no bugs. Just dead silence. Inside, the lights were dim and yellow. The shelves were mostly empty, except for old candy bars and dusty bags of chips. At the counter stood a man who looked like he had not slept in weeks. His name tag was smeared, but I thought it said Lewis. Just gas, I said. Whatever is cheapest. He said nothing, only nodded and hit a button on the register. The numbers lit up, but no sound came from the machine. I left the money and turned to go. As I reached for the door, he spoke. She does not like to be ignored. I froze. What? She waited for you, he said. She waits for everyone. I turned to face him, but he was no longer behind the counter. The room was empty. I ran outside. Elena was gone. The passenger side door stood open. The trees surrounding the gas station seemed to lean in closer. The truck was gone. The light above the pumps had stopped flickering. Elena! I shouted. No response. I spun in circles, heart racing, searching the tree line. Nothing moved. Not a single sound answered me. Then, far down the road, I saw her. The girl. She stood in the middle of the road this time, facing me directly. And beside her was Elena, unmoving, head lowered like she was asleep on her feet. I got back in the car, turned the engine, and drove toward them slowly. As I approached, the girl raised her arm. Just one finger, pointing left. I stopped. Suddenly, the sky above us turned a deep, unnatural red. The headlights flickered, and the dashboard lights began to pulse like a heartbeat. Then, just as suddenly, darkness returned. And they were gone. Both of them. I jumped out of the car, yelling Elena's name into the stillness, the cold air slicing through my throat. My voice echoed, bouncing off the trees as though the forest was mocking me. I ran toward the spot where they had stood only moments ago, but the road was empty now. No footprints, no movement, not even the lingering warmth of breath in the air. I dropped to my knees and stared at the pavement. There was no logical explanation, and that was what terrified me the most. I had spent my entire career rescuing people from the brink, stitching life back into broken bodies, bringing calm to chaos. But this was a kind of chaos that refused logic, ignored rules, and thrived on fear. The car engine began to sputter behind me. I stood quickly and ran back toward it, but the moment I opened the door, the dashboard clock blinked to life. It read 11:44 a.m. My wristwatch said 1:17 a.m. I started the engine and it came alive without a sound. No rumble, no vibration, just stillness and headlights cutting a path through the dark. I sat there for several moments, unsure whether to wait or drive or scream. I reached for my phone again. Still no signal. The photo gallery had changed too. Every image in my camera roll was now the same. A blurry photo of the road and the girl standing in the middle. I threw the phone into the passenger seat and started driving. Not because I had a destination, but because staying still felt like surrender. Every mile that passed without incident only deepened the tension inside my chest. The girl did not reappear. Elena did not answer when I shouted. The trees thinned slowly, and by the time I reached a small clearing with a wooden fence and a church-shaped silhouette in the distance, I almost believed the worst was over. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. The girl was sitting in my back seat. She did not move. She did not speak. Her head leaned slightly to one side, and her face remained obscured by her hair. I did not stop. I did not turn around. I focused only on the road. The engine began to overheat. I watched the needle on the temperature gauge drift past the red line. Smoke rose from under the hood, and the car shuddered with each passing second. But the road stretched forward, and I held the wheel like it was the only real thing left in the world. The girl whispered. Her voice was soft, like dead leaves brushing a window. She was kind, she said. You are not. My knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. Where is she? She followed the wrong road. The smoke thickened. My eyes burned. I slammed the brakes and the car screeched to a stop on the gravel. I turned around in the seat, ready to confront her, ready to scream, to demand answers. The back seat was empty. I stumbled out of the car into the cold night air. The forest loomed in every direction, gnarled trees bending toward me like observers at a funeral. I stood there, shaking on. A sound echoed from the woods. Laughter. Not the kind that belongs to children or joy, but the hollow sound of something pretending to laugh. I turned toward the noise and saw a faint light blinking deep between the trees. It was the gas station. I had driven for over 20 minutes in a straight line, yet there it stood, exactly as before. Same flickering light, same cracked pavement, same dead air. I got back in the car and drove past it without stopping. I drove for what felt like hours. The night did not end. The road did not change. The sky remained starless and black. Each time I passed that station, I felt the same pull in my chest, like gravity trying to drag me into something I would not survive. And each time, the girl stood somewhere along the road, watching me. Sometimes she was on the left, other times on the right. Sometimes she sat on the guardrail. Once, she lay in the middle of the road, arms spread wide as though she were offering herself to the darkness. But I never stopped. I never turned. Until the night began to fracture. The headlights flickered, not like before, but like a strobe, fast and unnatural. The trees blurred into streaks of color. The car began to shake violently, metal groaning like a ship splitting in half. And then the world snapped. I woke up inside the car, slumped over the steering wheel. The car was not moving. Outside the windshield, I saw a calm neighborhood street. Familiar houses. Lights on in windows. The early blue haze of morning just beginning to touch the rooftops. My heart slammed against my ribs as I sat up and realized where I was. I stepped out of the car slowly. The air was cold but not suffocating like before. I could hear birds. A distant dog barking. I stood there for several minutes, staring at my apartment building in disbelief. Had I imagined everything? Had I suffered a breakdown? Then I saw the note tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle like it had been sitting there for days. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, in small neat handwriting it read, "She is not finished with you. Drive again, and she will return." There was no signature, no address, just that one sentence. I looked up and scanned the street. Everything seemed normal. My neighbor's car was parked where it always was. The streetlight buzzed. A jogger ran by, nodding at me. I went inside. The apartment was exactly as we had left it. Except for one thing. Elena's shoes were by the door. Covered in forest dirt. I walked slowly through the rooms, calling her name. No response. In our bedroom, her side of the bed was made. Her phone lay on the nightstand, charged and blinking. I opened her photo app. The gallery was empty. Every single picture was gone. Except one. It was the girl, standing in our kitchen. I dropped the phone. It shattered on the hardwood floor. I backed away, my breath catching in my throat. Then I heard the water running in the bathroom. The door creaked open. Elena stepped out, drying her hands on a towel. She looked tired but calm. Normal. She smiled at me. "Everything all right?" she asked. I could not answer. I only nodded. We did not speak about it that day, or the next. But that night, I unplugged the GPS. I filled the tank to full. And I threw away every map in the car. Because I knew something now. The road remembers you. And so does she. If you are driving at night and see a girl standing alone, do not stop. Keep driving. No matter what she says. No matter who she looks like. And if you do stop, you may never leave that road again. For the next 3 days, Elena behaved exactly like herself. She cooked, she laughed, she replied to text messages with her usual warmth. But I watched her. I watched the way her eyes lingered too long on empty corners. I noticed how, every now and then, she would pause mid-sentence and blink, as if waking from a dream. I saw her stand in the hallway late at night, staring at nothing. When I asked her what she was doing, she would say things like, "Just thinking," or, "I forgot what I came for." And then there were the drawings. I found the first one in the trash. It was a simple sketch made in black pencil on a torn envelope. A little girl standing in the middle of the road. Next to it, in tiny letters, were the words, "She follows the drivers." I did not mention it at first. I wanted to believe it was just an echo, something left in Elena's mind from that night. After all, I was not exactly stable myself. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that stretch of road, the girl's face obscured, the flickering gas station sign, the ticking of broken clocks. Then I found the second drawing. It was taped to the back of the bathroom mirror. This time the girl was standing in front of our apartment building. In the picture, I was at the window watching her. My eyes were hollow. I confronted Elena about it. She looked confused, then frightened. "I did not draw that," she said. "Elena, it is your handwriting." She took the paper, stared at it, and then dropped it like it burned her fingers. "I do not remember doing that," she said. "I do not remember anything about it." From that moment on, the atmosphere in the apartment changed. Not just emotionally, physically. Our clocks began to desynchronize. The microwave blinked 6:40 a.m., while the oven insisted it was 2:23 p.m. My wristwatch reset itself twice in a single hour. Elena's phone would ring, but when she answered, it would be nothing but static. We tried to leave the city for a weekend, just to clear our minds. But every time we tried to take a new road, we would end up back at the gas station. It did not matter which direction we went, or how many turns we made. The highway would curve, split, disappear into woods, and eventually return us to the same spot. Same flickering sign. Same unmoving pumps. And she would be there. Sometimes she stood by the pumps. Sometimes she leaned against the door. Once, we found her sitting on the hood of our car. But she never moved. She only watched. We stopped driving at night altogether. But the nightmares continued. I would wake at 3:33 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing in the hallway. I would get up, turn on every light, check every lock, and return to bed more tired than before. Elena, meanwhile, began writing things in her sleep. I discovered it one morning. Her journal was open beside her on the bed, and a single phrase had been written over and over again across the pages. One road. One girl. One end. Each line was identical, same size, same pressure. But Elena insisted she had no memory of writing them. Eventually, I took her to a therapist. We told the story in pieces, carefully avoiding words like ghost or spirit. The therapist listened, nodded, and suggested we were experiencing shared trauma. He offered medication, breathing techniques. But the next time we returned home, the girl was in our parking lot. She stood beside our car, staring up at our window. We moved to a new apartment the following week. We did not tell anyone where we were going. No social media. No address forwarding. Just a fresh start in a city 300 miles away. For a few weeks, things improved. We slept. We laughed. We started to believe. Until I received the envelope. No name. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. The girl. Standing at the end of our new street. In the background, my reflection in our window. Mouth open in silent terror. The night after I found the Polaroid, we sat in the dark of our living room, the curtains drawn tight against the city outside. Elena had barely spoken since we saw the photograph, her hands twisting in her lap like she was still trying to figure out how her own body worked. She hadn't been sleeping, and I could see the faint dark circles under her eyes, deeper than before. I didn't want to talk about it. But the weight of the silence was crushing, and I had to say something. "Maybe it's a prank," I said, trying to convince myself more than her. "Maybe," Elena replied, her voice flat. "But why would someone know where we live? How would they get that picture?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. It was a question I hadn't asked myself. It made everything feel so much more real. Whoever was behind this, they knew things. They knew where we were. They knew how to get to us. And then, as if on cue, there was a knock at the door. A soft, almost imperceptible knock. Too light to be the delivery man or a neighbor. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart hammering in my chest. Elena didn't move. The air in the room felt heavier, like it was thickening around us. I slowly made my way to the door, glancing through the peephole. There was no one there. Just the empty hallway, dimly lit by the overhead lights. I opened the door cautiously, scanning the floor. Nothing. But then, at the very edge of the doorstep, there was an envelope sealed with dark red wax. No name, no address, just the same black wax seal. It was exactly the same as the one in the Polaroid. I picked it up with trembling hands, the weight of it somehow heavier than I had expected. I glanced at Elena, who had come up behind me, and handed it to her. Her face went pale as she took the envelope. "Don't open it," she said, her voice tight. But I wasn't going to listen. I couldn't. My fingers were already working the wax seal, pulling the envelope open. Inside, there was another picture. This one was different. It was an image of Elena. Her face was pale, her eyes wide open in terror. She was standing in a hallway I recognized. It was our old apartment. But that wasn't what stopped my heart. It wasn't the fact that she was there, in that place, with that expression. What stopped my heart was the shadow looming behind her. It was tall, its form elongated and stretched in a way that didn't belong. The darkness seemed to leak from it, pooling on the floor like ink. The only thing visible in the shadow was the girl. The same girl from the street. The girl from our parking lot. The girl who had been standing outside our new home. Elena gasped, dropping the picture. I don't understand. How is this possible?" I picked up the picture, the chill from it settling deep into my bones. There were no words, no explanation. Just the image, the terror etched into Elena's face. A small sound escaped her lips. "We need to leave." And then, like a sickening twist of fate, the lights flickered. The electricity cut out, and the room plunged into complete darkness. I reached for her, pulling her close, feeling her stiffen in my arms. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing, the air thick and heavy. And then footsteps. Not outside this time. Not even in the hallway. Footsteps from behind us. I turned slowly, my eyes straining in the blackness. A small sliver of light came from the street lamp outside, just enough to cast long shadows across the walls. The footsteps were getting closer, deliberate, slow. A breath, a whisper. One road. One girl. One end. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The voice sounded like it came from the shadows themselves, an eerie whisper that seemed to settle inside my skull. I grabbed Elena's hand, pulling her toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, it jammed. Stuck. The footsteps grew louder, closer, then a soft, rasping giggle. High-pitched. I spun around to face the sound. There, standing just a few feet away, was the girl. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and hollow. She was smiling, a twisted, unnatural smile that stretched far too wide. Her head tilted at an odd angle as she stared at us, as if waiting for us to say something, to react. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. It felt like my body was frozen, rooted to the spot. Elena, however, wasn't frozen. She broke free from my grip and stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want from us?" The girl didn't answer. Instead, she raised her hand, pointing directly at Elena, her finger trembling as if she were trying to reach something just out of grasp. A shiver ran down my spine. The girl's hand trembled harder, and the air around us seemed to grow colder. Then, without warning, the girl vanished. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone. We both gasped, blinking in the sudden silence. The door, now completely unstuck, swung open. We didn't hesitate. We didn't think. We just ran. We didn't stop running. We burst out the door and into the hall, our footsteps pounding in unison, the air thick with fear. The stairwell felt like an eternity, stretching on and on as we descended, our hearts hammering in our chests. The silence of the building seemed to press in on us, as if the walls were closing in, suffocating us in the aftermath of what we'd seen. The parking lot was just ahead. We didn't even look back. But as we reached the car, the weight of it all suddenly hit me. "Elena, wait," I said, gasping for breath, grabbing her arm. "We need to understand what's happening. We can't keep running forever. There's something we're missing." She didn't turn to face me, her eyes wide with terror, her breath shallow. Her lips trembled, and I could see her shaking hands. And then, slowly, she pulled away from me. She looked past my shoulder, her gaze locked on something I couldn't see. The color drained from her face. I turned, my heart lurching in my chest. The girl was there, standing in the parking lot, exactly where we'd been just moments before. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood dozens of figures, shadowy, indistinct shapes that blurred into the night, their faces obscured. Each one was taller than the last, their bodies stretching, their shadows flickering like flames in the wind. They were all silent, watching us. The girl stepped forward, her smile wider than ever, her eyes gleaming with something unspoken, something ancient. "One road. One girl. One end." The words echoed in the night, their meaning sinking deep into my soul. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. I looked at Elena, and in her eyes I saw it. The truth. We had never left. The girl, the shadows, had always been with us. They weren't chasing us. They were part of us. Part of everything we had ever known. I stepped forward, slowly, my legs trembling beneath me. The fear was unbearable, but there was no way out anymore. We couldn't outrun what was already inside us. "Elena," I said softly, my voice shaking, "we have to end it." For a moment, I thought she might not hear me. But then she nodded. Her lips parted and she whispered, "I know." And with that, we took one final step toward the girl. Toward the end. The shadows surged around us, pulling us in, wrapping themselves around our bodies. But this time, we didn't fight. We didn't struggle. The weight of it all crushed down on us, but we didn't resist. As the darkness swallowed us whole, I finally understood. One road. One girl. One end. And then, there was nothing but silence.